Hi and welcome to another video. In this video we're going to set up 10 gigabit Ethernet on an unRAID server, a Windows PC and a Hackintosh running OSX High Sierra, and we're going to do all of this without costing much money. So, we've had gigabit Ethernet for years and years now, actually first coming into use in 1999, so that's getting on 20 years ago. Yes, we didn't have it in our home computers and networks. That was high-end stuff back then, even for Google, so definitely out of reach for the normal home user. But look at it this way, the best enterprise CPUs at the end of the 90s were nothing compared to cheap consumer CPUs today. Also hard drives. The best hard drives were nothing compared to a cheap SSD or NVMe drive today. So we wouldn't be content now using the best CPUs of 1999 or the best hard drives of 1999. So why are we happy using 1999's best network speeds? For us enthusiasts, isn't it time to get something a little bit faster? And did you know we've actually had 10 gigabit Ethernet for a long time as well? Actually, back in 2002, we first saw it over fibre connections, and then in 2006 we got 10 gigabit Ethernet over copper, and two different standards emerged. Firstly, 10G-base-T, using the familiar RJ45 port over Cat5e and better cable. Cat5e limited to about 45 metres, but Cat6a and 7 up to 100 metres in length. The other standard was SPF Plus direct attach copper, which uses a different sort of cable, lengths of which are limited to 7 metres with a passive SPF connection and 15 with an active one. So based on those facts, you'd have thought that the 10G-base-T would have had the highest adoption, but the SPF Plus had the highest adoption rate for two main reasons. Firstly, because SPF Plus uses a lot less power than 10G-base-T, which depending on cable length needs between 2 and 5 watts at each end of the cable, and this is compared to only 0.7 of a watt for SPF Plus. And this lower power consumption can make for huge savings in a data center, because roughly for every watt of power consumed, typically another 2 watts are needed for cooling. So this makes for far lower operational costs. And the other reason for SPF Plus's higher adoption rate is due to the fact that it has lower latency. The latency being about 0.3 milliseconds per link as opposed to 2.6 milliseconds per link for 10G-base-T. I think the reason we don't see 10 gigabit Ethernet in the home and small office is because it would need to be a 10G-base-T, so it could take advantage of existing network cabling, but the power efficiency just isn't there yet for that market. And let's be realistic, gigabit Ethernet is fine for the average user. So if you're an average user, you can stop watching this video now, no need to go on. Ah, you're still here? Then let's carry on, my fellow geeks. So we're going to be using SPF Plus cards for our 10 gigabit Ethernet network. But we're not going to be replacing our existing gigabit Ethernet network, but we're just going to be adding some 10 gigabit connections to it, and then we can have some super fast transfer speeds between our home server and other computers. We just need to plan out what we need, the distance between our computers for cable length, and the type of operating system we're running for a brand of 10GBE card. And in this video I'm going to show you how to use 10GBE on Linux, Windows and OS X. Now, no prizes for guessing which is the most awkward system to put a 10 gigabit Ethernet card into. Yes, you've got it, it's OS X, good old Apple. So for those of us that have a Mac Pro or a Hackintosh that we want a 10 GBE connection on, we have to really carefully choose which adapter to buy. Now we could just buy a 10 GBE Presto network adapter, but that will cost us $399, that's too expensive. And I personally didn't want to get involved in trying to flash an Intel card to make it compatible. I wanted something that was cheap and that would work straight out of the box. So there's a company called Solarflare, and they make 10 GBE cards with OSX drivers on their website. Now at first I was worried because it said the drivers were for OSX 10.9, and that was back in November 2013. And I'm running macOS Sierra on my Hackintosh, but when I got the card I installed the drivers and the installation went fine with absolutely no problems. And the exact card I used was the Solarflare SFN5122F dual port card. Now I couldn't find any cheap ones here in the UK, so I had to order from the USA, where there were a lot of really good value cards for sale, where I picked mine up off eBay for only $50. So this is a great card for OSX, and really good value too. But whilst it works fine in Windows and Linux as well, unfortunately if you're using unRAID Linux it doesn't have support in that as yet. And I'm using that for my home server. So for Windows and Linux I recommend using a Mellanox card. You can easily find these cards online and they can be bought very cheaply, and you can often find a pair of cards and an SPF cable as a bundle. I bought two Mellanox 10GBE cards and a 3-meter cable for only €65. So this is all you're going to need to spend if connecting two computers together, so long as they're running either Windows or Linux. Now I have two computers on my desk. One is my main unRAID server, but the other machine runs my test unRAID server, ESXi, and also bare metal installs of Windows, OSX and Fedora. So using the two Mellanox cards allowed me to connect these two machines together. So my main unRAID server could connect to the other computer whether it is running unRAID, Windows or Fedora, but not OSX. So I had to make a choice. If I wanted to use OSX, then I had to use the Solarflare card, but the downside of that was I wasn't able to use 10GBE on my test unRAID server. Well, that's not really much of a problem to me because it's much more important to use it on OSX, as that's my daily driver. So I went for the Solarflare card on the second computer. And anyway, I'm going to send an email across to Tom at Lime Technology and ask him if he'll maybe put those drivers in the next build of unRAID. So, it's important to choose what you need and then buy accordingly. Wait for it all to turn up and then install into the machines. Now you might not all be as lucky as I was and get a small pack of free gummy bears with the cards. And I was really surprised to see they're actually branded with the seller's company name. So with the hardware installed, we can now move on to the easy part, which is configuring it all. And yes, this part is much easier than you may think. Let's take the first computer, for me my unRAID Linux server. And that's currently connected with my normal gigabit Ethernet to my internet router, which then in turn connects to my Windows box. And the IP addresses here are all in the 10.10.20 range, the server being .199, the Windows box being .197, and the router, the default gateway, being .1. So all we need to do is to set up a second network range which we assign to the 10 gigabit Ethernet cards. This will be a peer-to-peer network, so we don't need a network switch. And so now when connecting from the client computer, here the Windows box, we can map a network drive to the share on the server, but not using the server name, but using its 10 GBE IP address. Now we could even map another network drive to the same share on the server, but using the server name, and this would take a different route to the same destination but going through the gigabit Ethernet, and this is because the server name will resolve to the IP address on the main network. So this is why it's important to use the IP address when using 10 GBE in a peer-to-peer network. Now we're not just limited to connecting two computers directly together, we could also connect to a third computer. If we have a 2-port GBE card, we can assign a different network address range to each port. So in this example, the two client computers can connect to the server by 10 GBE, but if the two clients need to contact each other, then they have to do this by the gigabit Ethernet through the router. So that's the theory done, now let's go ahead and set it up in practice. The first computer we'll set up is an unRAID server. Right, so the card's installed and here we are on the unRAID dashboard. We're going to need to make some changes to the network settings, so in order for that to take effect we're going to have to actually shut down the array. So I'm going to click on to stop. And while the array is shutting down, let's just go on to Tools, System Devices, and you can see here is the 10 gigabit Ethernet card. Okay, so the array's stopped now, So let's click onto settings and then network settings, and if we scroll down here, this first interface, this is my normal gigabit Ethernet card, and you can see that my IP address range is the 10.10.20 range and my server IP address is .199. And if I scroll down here, this is my 10 gigabit Ethernet card, and you can see here the IP address is set onto automatic, so we need to change that and put it onto static, and then just put an IP address in here. So I'm going to put 192.168.11. I'm going to keep the end the same, so it's going to be .199, and I'm going to change this to /24 so the subnet mask is correct. And just one other thing to do here, make sure enable bridging is turned on. So if it was on no, just flip it onto yes, and you can see here it creates another bridge, BR1. Now this is useful if we want to assign a virtual network adapter to the 10 gigabit Ethernet adapter, like I did in my last video setting up an iSCSI target. So I could have an iSCSI target running across the 10 gigabit Ethernet adapter. So that's all we need to do is set the card with a unique IP address on a different network range. So then we just need to click onto apply and done. And now we can just start back up the array and we're good to go on unRAID. So next let's set up 10 gigabit Ethernet on OSX. Okay, so the Solarflare 10 gigabit Ethernet card is inside my Hackintosh. But if I go to about this Mac and then system report and we look at network, there's only my Bluetooth adapter and my normal gigabit Ethernet card that we can actually see. So we need to install the drivers from the Solarflare site. So let's do a search for Solarflare OSX drivers, and let's go to the Solarflare support, and here at the bottom we'll see the OSX 10.9 and onwards drivers. So let's click onto that and download it. Let's open the file and install the drivers. Now you may get a message saying that the identity of the developer can't be confirmed, so just click onto OK and go to your preferences and then go to security and privacy and then just click on open anyway here. Then click onto open and then follow through and install the drivers. So now let's look at our system report and network, and we can see under active services we've still only got the Bluetooth, PAN and the Ethernet. So what we need to do is go to system preferences, click onto network and then click the plus here, and let's give it a name, and I'm going to call it 10 GBE and then in brackets 1 because I have 2 ports on this card. And then on the interface we can see now we've got Ethernet EN3 and EN4, so these are the 2 ports on my 10 gigabit Ethernet. So for port 1 I'm going to choose EN3 here, and I'm going to add the other port as well and call that 10 GBE2 and create. And so as you can see here from my 2 ports, because this one's not connected, this is the one that my cable is actually plugged into, and it's got a self-assigned IP which is totally useless for us. So let's change that to manual, and I'm going to put in the IP address 192.168.11.197, and if you remember on the unRAID server I'd set the IP to be .199. I need to change the subnet mask here. I want that to be 255.255.0, and now I can click on to apply and we can see here the 10 GBE is connected. So let's look at about this Mac again, system report and network, and now we can see here the 10 GBE port 1 and 2 is here with the IP address I just assigned, and here's my gigabit Ethernet with its original IP address. Again, you can notice that I've put the last number in the IP to be the same, just so it's easy for me to remember what the IP address of the machine is. So let's close this now. Now I'm going to make a connection to the unRAID server over the 10 gigabit Ethernet. So for that I'm going to click onto go and then connect to server, and here I'm going to type smb : / and then the IP address that we set on the unRAID server. So that's 192.168.11.199, and then click connect and then connect again, and you can either connect as a guest or a registered user. So I'm going to connect as a registered user, and here we can see all of the shares on the server. So So I can connect any of these over the 10 GBE. For instance, I got one here called Mac, which I put a lot of my OSX files in, so I'm going to click OK on that one. Okay, so now you can see an icon on the desktop saying Mac. This is a mounted volume. The reason my icon looks different is I've changed what the icons look like on my Mac. But if I was to open this now, that's connected to the unRAID server through the 10 GBE card. One other little tip, if you click onto System Preferences and then go to your accounts and click on Login Items, then drag this into the login items, then every time you restart your Mac it will make an automatic connection through the 10 GBE card to whichever shares you want. Okay, so that's the OSX setup. So now let's configure the 10 GBE card in Windows 10. Okay, so on Windows, let's go to this PC and Properties and look at the Device Manager. And here you can see my 10 GBE Ethernet adapter is installed. I didn't have to put any drivers in at all. And again, the only reason I'm using the SolarStorm card on Windows is because I run OSX from this machine as well. Okay, so now let's go to the control panel and to network and sharing. Then let's change the adapter settings. Okay, and here you can see my normal gigabit Ethernet adapter. This one here is my private internet access VPN, but these two here, these are the two ports of the 10 GBE card. So to make them easily identifiable, I'm going to rename them to 10 gigabit Ethernet 1 and 2. You can see from the cross here, the first port doesn't have a cable plugged in, but the second does. So this is the one I'm going to assign a static IP address to. So highlight Internet Protocol version 4 and click Properties. And I'm going to use an IP address in the same range as what we set on the unRAID server. So 192.168.11.197. And the subnet mask, that's fine, 255.255.255.0. And you don't need to put in a default gateway, you don't need to put in any DNS servers, so just click onto OK. And let's close all these windows. Okay, so now with the IP address set for the network adapter, let's mount a map network drive. Okay, but before we go and map a network drive, I'm just going to show you here, I've got a RAM disk created on my Windows box, which uses 4 gigs of RAM, and I've also already got a share here, which is mapped across to a RAM disk on my unRAID server, and this is going through the normal gigabit Ethernet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to map another share, but this time using the 10 gigabit Ethernet, so I'm going to type in // and then the IP address of the unRAID server through the 10 GBE, which is 192.168.11.199, and the location I'm going to map it to is the same share, the unRAID RAM disk. And I'm going to rename these just for ease of use. This one here, you can see the IP address is on the 192.168.11 range, which is my 10 gigabit Ethernet. So I'm just going to rename it and call it unRAID RAM drive 10 GBE. And this one here, unRAID RAM drive gigabit. So now we can easily see which drive's which. So first let's copy the file from the RAM drive on the Windows box. Let's copy it over the gigabit Ethernet to see what the fastest speed we can get across gigabit Ethernet is. So you can see here the speed is 111 megs per second, which is about right. So remember, this is megabytes per second, not megabits per second, and a gigabit Ethernet is 1000 megabits. So basically we times this number by 8, which basically is saturating the gigabit Ethernet. Okay, so now let's delete the file. And let's go back again and copy the file, and this time we're going to put it in the same share, but this time via the 10 gigabit Ethernet. And now the speed is 1.04 gigabytes per second, so much faster. So let's multiply that by 8 for gigabits per second, and we've got 8,320 gigabits per second. So that's Windows set up as well. So transfer speeds are now super fast, and it can cost as low as €60 to set this up. Definitely worth it in my opinion, so why not give it a try? I use RAM disks in this video for the tests. If you'd like to see a video on how to set these up on various OSs, then please let me know in the comments below. So that brings us to the end of another video. If you liked it, then please hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. And if you'd like to support me in making these videos, then any donations are really appreciated, which you can do from the link in the description or the channel homepage. Anyway guys, so it's time to say goodbye, and whatever you're up to for the rest of the day, I hope it's good, and I'll catch you in another video.